So one of you in one on meeting with me recently asked a very simple question. Bodhicitta. We speak of cultivating it, many references to cultivating bodhicitta. It's a good translation, cultivating bodhicitta. How do you do that? How do you do that, you know? And the answer is there are multiple ways of doing it. There's no one strategy, there's no one recipe. If we had all been born in Tibet, let's say 100 years ago, 200 years ago, then their faith in the Buddha Dharma and that whole worldview, in the lamas, the institutions and so forth, was literally, it's with mother's milk. I mean, they're just getting it from the ground up. And so within that worldview, if you live in a Buddhist world, then a lot can be taken for granted and you can implement that into your practice immediately. Belief in reincarnation, karma, the 6 realms and so forth and so on. But as far as I can tell, none of us were born in that milieu, in that environment. And so I think it's, to my mind, just drawing from my own experience, in terms of a foundation for practice, any particular practice, the foundation, to my mind, when I know it works more effectively. It's very personal what I'm about to say, but it's very simple. I need to start from a place where I feel great confidence, real confidence. Not start with a leap of faith, maybe it's true, maybe it's not, and maybe I'll give it the benefit of the doubt, who knows, yeah, let's go, you know. Because then the foundation is always wobbly, in my experience. So if we just take one brief example, Shamatha. Well, you know, can we achieve Shamatha in this lifetime? Don't know. So that's not going to be the basis. Don't know. But which is better? To have a body-mind that is uptight, agitated, and alternatingly dull, or to have a body-mind that's relaxed, composed, and clear? I have no doubt. That's easy. Problem solved. And so is this worth doing? Whether we can go all the way and achieve 9 stages and achieve Shamatha, or whether we only get to 3 and we just kind of plateau out. But at least 3 is better than 1, you know. And so is that worth doing? And the answer is, to my mind, well, okay, that's the end of that conversation. And so to my mind, that was just taking one example, bodhicitta should be the same thing. For me, that's how I need to work, is not start with something that may or may not be true, and I'm not quite sure, but start where it's totally clear. And so it was a great atisha. This is a theme that the Dalai Lama has come back to so many times. As Buddha Dharma goes global, or as we like to say, goes west, you know, that it's good to tap into the Indian sources, some of which were not really highlighted in the Tibetan tradition, because they found what worked for them. And they didn't need everything in the ocean of the Buddha Dharma. They found what worked for them. And gosh, if it works, don't fix it, right? And so 1,000 years of Tibetan Buddhism, highlighting those practices they found helpful, but that means they didn't highlight certain other practices, such as the 4 applications of mindfulness. Really core, fantastic teachings. You'll hardly find any Lama who's taught that in the last 1,000 years, right? The 4 immeasurables as distinct practices that you don't simply do the liturgy for, you're really cultivating in a very rich, nuanced, multifaceted way. I think I've seen one text in Tibetan that really unpacks them. This is an area where Theravada is really strong, marvelously strong. Mindfulness of breathing is another good example. This fantastic practice, it's so good. Tibetans didn't do much. They do it for 21 breaths and say, basta. Let's get on with the good stuff. What do we visualize now? You know? And heck, let's just visualize from the beginning. I'm breathing the breath going in and down and out and down. Oh, I like visualization. You know, if you're living at 15,000 feet, I think it's different. I really do. I think, because I've been at 15,000 feet, it's easier to visualize. You know, that's what I found. I've been up there a number of times in different continents. It's something about that. The air's thinner, it's wide open, there's not so much noise, externally or internally. And when it's quiet, it's easier to visualize. Simple truth. Okay. But now we come back to bodhicitta. Where can we start out? Where it's just like, there's no conversation, there's no discussion, yes. Right. And I'll tell you what I've come up with. Of course, I didn't come up with anything. I just kind of looked what was right there in plain sight. The 4 immeasurables. Okay, which is better? To be hateful, mean-spirited, resentful, grumpy, or loving? Your choice. Compassion, no compassion. Empathetic joy, the hell with other people. And equanimity, I like you, but I can't stand you. You know? That's it. It's a chuckle. That's the end of the debate. There was no debate. We just kind of like, okay, any more dumb questions? And so it was Atisha. So I mentioned his name, and then I went off on my tangent. Atisha, who was utterly steeped in and embodied, I think, really the glories of Indian Buddhism at its very best. I mean, he was the par excellence. What can you say? He just embodied everything that was good about Mahayana Indian Buddhism. Everything, you know, really. And he said, when he'd spent all these 13, 14 years in Tibet and got to see how they were doing it, he said, oh, only you Tibetans know how to develop bodhicitta without developing four immeasurables. I think that was a facial expression. Because he was speaking ironically. Yeah? And so coming back there, you know. The Buddha alluded to these so many times in the Pali Canon. Of course they saturate the Mahayana tradition. But then we find them find the same ones in the Patanjali Yoga Sutras. There's nothing uniquely Buddhist about this. And then do you find, if not in that assortment, do you find these virtues in Christianity? Absolutely yes. All of them. All of them. You know. And then do you find them outside of the context of religion per se? Sure. Are there very, very loving people who have no religious beliefs at all? Very compassionate people who have tremendous capacity for empathetic joy and very even-heartedness, just their caring for other sentient beings, maybe not only just human beings, but caring for other sentient beings just spreads out like water over an alluvial plain. Are there people like that who just have no religious beliefs at all? The answer is yeah, sure. Why not? You know. And so these are just flat-out virtues. And you know, if we could hop in a spaceship, go through a wormhole and come out to another galaxy, these will be virtues there too. I can't imagine a world system where these are not considered to be virtues. And if they're not, that's a world system that's insane. I've already diagnosed them. You know. You're crazy. If you don't think these are virtues, there's something seriously wrong with you. Brain damage, you got too close to the sun, something happened. You know. And so there it is. So that's what I'd like to do for the next few days, is go through a sequence of practices. I'm not going to go the full spread, because I've taught these quite elaborately in the past, but going one by one. So we've already done this self-directed loving kindness, and that's exactly in accordance with the Buddha's own teachings when it comes to loving kindness. One who loves himself will never harm another, he said. You know? And in the classic teachings, Buddha-Gosa, the synthesizing, the real strategy of cultivating loving kindness in the Theravada tradition, you start with yourself. Shantideva says, if you don't reflect on the benefits of bodhicitta for yourself, how will you ever develop it for the sake of others? So we're not being temporarily selfish in directing this inwardly. We're being temporarily sane. You know, if this is good for oneself, then it'll be good for others. So without further ado, I'd like to go right into the practice. It'll be the practice of loving kindness. There are multiple approaches, but I've just selected one that I thought will at least do no harm. So please find a comfortable position. At any time, if you're really uncomfortable in the sitting position, then by all means, supine, you're always welcome. If you are comfortable for 24 minutes, it's a little bit better to be sitting, but no big deal about it, okay? Let's go back now, actually very briefly, to this root text and commentary by Panchen Lozang Chökyi. And we finished the preface, and now we go to the explanation in the composition's actual instruction on page 2. We'll write on to page 3, where he cites the root text from among the three divisions: preparation, the actual session, and post-meditation. So there's the overall format or structure of the text as a whole, the root text. Back to the commentary, the actual explanation of the instruction. So now we're going into the core. That has been composed is threefold. Within the instruction, there's the preparation to the practice of Mahamudra, the main practice, which we'll see consists of Shamatha Vipashyana, and then the follow-up. Okay. So, back to the root text. First, in order to enter the gateway and erect the supporting pillar. the mainstay, that which holds everything together. The gateway and the supporting pillar, these two things. Of the teaching in general, that is, the teaching means the Buddhist teaching, the Buddha Dhamma in general, and that so in general, and then the Mahayana in particular. So in order to do that, to enter and to create the structure that upholds everything, you must exert yourself in going for refuge and arousing the awakening mind. Awakening mind is his translation, it's a nice one, of bodhicitta, so arousing or cultivating bodhicitta, not just by lip service or words alone. It's interesting he says that, not just by lip service. I mean, he didn't really need to add that, he could have just stopped. But he did add that. And he's writing that in the 17th century. And suggests it's been going on for a long time. Wherever there's liturgy, I mean, really, wherever there's liturgy, in the United States in the 1950s, I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and blah, 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 you know. We did that every day, you know. Let's go, we just run through it. Is anybody thinking, or is it just a routine you have to get through, you know? And then for those of you who have commitments, anybody have commitments? You know, you've got to do them every day, right? Otherwise, well, hell hath no fury, like a commitment scorned. And so, you know, we get through them. It's easy to do. It's easy to get into that mindset. Whew, I finished my daily recitations. Whew, Kandun, literally. I mean, they're so blunt about it. When Tibetans speak of doing this, they call it Kandun, my oral recitations. I finished my oral recitations. I went, and then blah, 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 I finished, you know, as if I just fulfilled my commitment by turning on the tape recorder, while my mind's just going blah, 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 blah. So this is not something just us, you know, kooky Western practitioners. This was kooky Tibetan practitioners. And it's back to the 17th century, and I don't think it began in that century. Whenever we have a routine, a ritual, it's kind of like a centrifugal force that operates to throw us out, you know, into the outward manifestation, and it's ever so easy to lose the core, you know. In which case, who do we think we're kidding? You know, if we're just doing a routine, who exactly are we kidding? Maybe your next door neighbor, you see, oh, what a holy person, blah, 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 blah. Or they see me out walking with my mala, oh, he must be a holy man. He's got his mala, he's walking along mumbling under his breath. He must be, oh, a spiritual person. Maybe. Maybe not. Maybe he just dresses funny. You know? And likes malas. You know? Got to have something to do. You know, some people use those if they have kind of nervousness. They just use those because they're nervous. So, there's nothing wrong with the outer display, but if that's all there is to it, well, then that's it. That's all there is to it. So there's where we stop. He's highlighted two things that are really the entry and then the fundamental thing that holds everything up, the mainstay. He calls it the supporting pillar, nice translation. He's referring, of course, to refuge, which is the gateway to entering into the teachings, the path, the training, taught by the Buddha, and then, of course, bodhicitta being that which is the central pillar that upholds the whole of Mahayana practice, all the 5 paths, the entirety of Mahayana Buddhism. So it really occurred to me, and I was very happy with the thought. It kind of came to mind, and I smiled. Oh, wouldn't it be nice now just to set that aside, because he doesn't elaborate much. He just says, cultivate them, and don't just give them lip service. It occurred to me, and I was very happy with the thought. It kind of came to mind, and I smiled. Oh, wouldn't it be nice now just to set that aside, because he doesn't elaborate much. He just says, cultivate them, and don't just give them lip service to it. Well, lo and behold, his contemporary, Karma Chagmé, having finished his entire exposition of the path with elaborate teachings on the preliminaries, all the way through the texture, the Chötgyal, rainbow body, the whole 9 yards, went through everything. Then he comes back, and this is the first thing he addressed when he thought, okay, well, what more might I add to just fill this out, to make sure it's very fully enriched, so to speak. And the topic that he came back to was Mahayana Refuge and the Spirit of Awakening. So awakening mind, spirit of awakening, tomatoes. I just call it bodhicitta by now because everybody knows bodhicitta. So it's kind of a strange thing as a translator. You know, if we take a term from Sanskrit and then we translate it in English, if your reader, upon reading your English translation, is thinking, what is it in Sanskrit? Which happens a lot. You may as well just say the Sanskrit. right? Because these words, bodhicitta, I mean, who doesn't, if you're practicing, who doesn't know what bodhicitta means? So if we really know what it means, then why not just include that with samadhi and dharma and karma and Buddha and a number of other Sanskrit terms? So it's not a right or wrong here, but I just figure, hey, we're translating into the Sanskrit. English especially is such an amorphous, absorbative or something. Like, it absorbs so much, from every kind of source. Why not just kind of sponge in more Sanskrit? That's just my preference. It's not a better preference, it's just my preference. So there it is, bodhicitta, refuge of bodhicitta. So we go right to, I'm just going to be reading the root text. You have Gyatso Rinpoche, his wonderful commentary is in smaller letters, as you can see. So I leave you to read that at your leisure, but I'll be giving the oral transmission and commentary just on the root text. And I thought this chapter was just too good to skip. There will be no time to give an oral commentary and transmission on all of the chapters. You can see it's a pretty thick book. But I thought this would be a really good place to start. So we now turn. We'll get back, of course, after we finish a chapter, we'll go back to Panchen Lozang text on Mahamudra. But he's highlighted how enormously important this is, giving a whole chapter on it. So that's where we go right now. So he starts, this is a kind of a transmission that he himself is passing on within the kind of the vein, the current of Avalokiteshvara, the embodiment, the enlightened embodiment of compassion. So it says, these are the profound practical instructions of Avalokiteshvara, stemming from visionary teachings, and of course this is the principal object of refuge for the people of Tibet as the people of Tibet. Very central. So here it is. So he's now in very Tibetan fashion, but in fact this is also actually classical Indian Mahayana fashion. He's going to invite you into an elaborate visualization. It's not just Tibetan, but it's very Mahayana, it's very elaborate. We'll read through it once. You can always simplify, but why not give the full bouquet? And then you might wind up with just three flowers after all is said and done, if you like simplicity. I must say, I like simplicity. But here he says, okay, he's setting the stage for taking refuge, for Mahayana taking refuge, taking the refuge vows, which we shall do here. I invite you to do so. Obviously, nobody would even know how to make you if you didn't want to, nor would anybody want to. So he says, in terms of setting the stage, he says, on your right side, arrange an image of the Buddha. It could be a tanka, a statue, what have you. And Dharma volumes, such as this text of instruction, just place naked awareness right there. It could be Prajnaparamita, Heart Sutra, anything you like. But the image of the Buddha is symbolizing the body of the Buddha. The Dharma, of course, symbolizing the speech, or the Dharma refuge. And then he continues, if you have a stupa, the stupa, of course, symbolizes the Buddha mind. Buddha mind. And there's a whole book written on that, just the full symbolism of the stupa and how it symbolizes the multiple aspects of enlightened mind of Dharmakaya. So if you have a stupa, place it there as well. And in front of all these, lay out the 7 kinds of offerings. So you've seen the 7 offering bowls, a mandala, and so on. So just make offerings, bountiful offerings. Okay, so there it is. And I would, at your leisure, we won't do it right now because time is short, but do read Gyatso Rinpoche's commentary. This was his oral commentary. I was translating for him at this time. I translated the text and his commentary, and it's really very choice. So I leave you to read that at your leisure. But now Karma Chagmé Rinpoche continues, I shall offer a more extensive explanation of the meaning of refuge and bodhicitta than was presented earlier in the instructions on the preliminaries, that is, in the main text. And of course that was the section preceding the portion of the text translated in the volume, A Spacious Path to Freedom, which has not been translated yet in English, but the material has been covered elaborately in many, many texts. So he's going to expound on this, elaborate on this, just because it's so important that we don't fall into what people were falling back into then in the 17th century and do now, of just kind of cruising through as a liturgy, just as a liturgy. And it's a beautiful liturgy, but that all it is, then it's just words, lip service. Once you've understood the meaning of this, what he's about to explain, if you again request these vows, taking the vows of refuge, once you've really understood the meaning, the vows will truly arise in you. This will become part of your being. It is difficult for them to arise simply by engaging in recitations without understanding the meaning. So, In this supplementary Dharma is this entire book, and this was translated in its entirety. This Gyapchur, it's called Tibetan, Gyapchur, the back Dharma, that is the afterword, but it's 300 pages of afterword. This is the supplementary Dharma. In this supplementary Dharma, in this chapter, the vows will be bestowed. So he's about to invite us to take refuge and tell us exactly how. In terms of the vows of refuge, there are those common to the different yanas, the Shravakayana, Pratyekabuddhayana, Vajrayana. And then there are the Mahayana vows of refuge. So there's a general taking of refuge, simply that you want to follow the teachings, the path set forth by the Buddha. That would be general, common to all of the different sub-paths. And then there are the vows of refuge that are unique to the Mahayana, for those who are really dedicated to following the Bodhisattva way of life to its culmination, a perfect Buddhahood. And he said, and now we are concerned with the latter. Of course, the whole text, this Basic Path to Freedom, and this is all about the union of Mahamudra and Dzogchen. And this, frankly, is inconceivable outside of the context of the Mahayana and outside of the context of bodhicitta. You can conceive of it, but then it's no longer Mahayana or Dzogchen. It's something stripped down, denuded, something different. And that happens a lot, but not here. So here is the object from whom the vows are requested, according to the tradition of the present teachings. So in the lineage, the Karma Chagmé, in whom are united the lineage, the current, the flow of blessings of both the Kagyü and the Nyingma, the Mahamudra and Dzogchen traditions. Here's what he's been taught, here's what he passes on. So here's a visualization. As I'm reading through it, why not just do it? It's fun. As well as you can. In the space in front of you, there's a broad, vast, and mighty throne of jewels, supported by lions. Now, of course, all of this is symbolic. Lions suggesting, as it does in the West, fearlessness. A throne of jewels, something magnificent, awesome. So imagine this in space in front of you. Upon it is a variegated lotus. Variegated means multicolored, red, white, yellow, green, and so on. Upon it, as a seat, upon it is a variegated lotus with 100,000 petals. It doesn't need to be exactly 100,000, more or less. On which rests a round moon disk. So you've all seen this portrayed in the tankas. The moon disk is flat, it fits in the center of the lotus, the open lotus. And this is going to be the seat of the Buddha, who will be the object of refuge here. In its center is your own primary spiritual mentor, your own primary guru, your root lama. And he's suggesting in this context, when you think of your root lama, why not think of Amitabha? That would be a good root lama. And then the person or persons, you can have more than one root lama, as emanations of Amitabha, the Buddha of boundless light. So in the center is your own root lama, Amitabha, in the form of a Buddha, with the classic 32 major, the 80 minor marks, ruby red in color, and embodying compassion. Simply a veritable, literal embodiment of compassion. Present in the garb of a Sambhogakaya. So this would be the full ornamentation, as you see Avalokiteshvara. And surrounded by the Kagyü Lamas. Now, I won't read it, but Gyatso Rinpoche, who is a lineage holder of this tradition, he points out that he's not referring to something sectarian, like Kagyü versus Nyingma or Mahayana versus something else. Kagyü means simply the lineage of teachings. Kagyü, lineage of the teachings. Okay? So nothing sectarian here. But he's surrounded by these lamas. Okay? The lineage of your own teachers. And whoever they may be. They may come from the Zen tradition, the Chan, whoever they may be. In front of him, so there's Amitabha on this vast throne. In front of him, on another throne, is the Yidam of Avalokiteshvara, the personal deity. Avalokiteshvara, the embodiment of compassion, surrounded by a myriad of Yidams, other Yidams, Manjushri, Vajrapani, and so on. All of this is simply highlighting the multiple facets of Buddha mind, not really taking refuge in kind of what it's, just a whole bunch of gods, but different facets of Buddha mind, each one symbolically portrayed as embodiment of compassion, wisdom, and so on. So there is Avalokiteshvara sitting right in front of Amitabha. On his right is Buddha Shakyamuni, surrounded by a myriad of Buddhas, including the 1,000 Buddhas of this fortunate era. So this is a vast array in front of you. Behind him, behind Buddha Shakyamuni, is the Perfection of Wisdom Sutra in 100,000 stanzas, the most elaborate of the versions of the Prajnaparamita. And surrounded, these texts are surrounded by a myriad of treatises and volumes of the sublime Dharma. So all of this symbolizing the speech of the Buddha, the Dharma that sets forth the path. So this is behind him. So Avalokiteshvara in the center, Buddha Shakyamuni on his right, behind him the Perfection of Wisdom. On his left, that is, on the left of Avalokiteshvara, is Vajrapani, dark blue, quite wrathful in countenance, in manifestation, the embodiment of enlightened power, surrounded by a myriad of the Mahayana and Hinayana Sangha, including the 8 Bodhisattva spiritual sons and the 8 supreme Shravakas, so the many disciples of the Buddha. All the cardinal and intermediate directions are filled with viras and dakinis, male and female manifestations of enlightened beings. So there's Amitabha up above, in front of Avalokiteshvara. On his right, Buddha Shakyamuni. On his left, Vajrapani. Beneath him are a myriad of Dharma protectors, Dharmapalas, including the 4-armed Mahakala, 6-armed Mahakala, the Takla Gumbo. On the crowns of their heads is Om, at their throats Ah, and at their hearts Hum. White, red, and blue. This, of course, becomes complex, so simply you don't have to visualize everything in detail. You probably can't. But you can visualize that they are there without seeing the details of each form. From the Hum at their hearts of each of these enlightened beings, from the Hung at their heart, symbolizing, of course, Buddha mind, rays of light are emitted in the 10 directions, inviting all the lamas, chosen deities or personal deities, yidams, viras, dakinis, and dharma protectors, like gathering clouds. So from this Hung at the heart of each of these enlightened beings, it's like they're sending out a beacon, this deep blue light flowing out in all directions. And it's sending out a beacon of an invitation. You visualize these beings, but now you invite the actual Buddhas, the actual Bodhisattvas, Dharmapalas, and so forth, to come hither. Imagine that they, all these beings, dissolve into the deities visualized in front of you. So now, rather than simply being a creation of your own mind, imagine that the creations of your own mind are suffused by the beings themselves, that you're actually in the presence of these myriad Buddhas. You may simply sit as you are, but he says, with palms, do this in your imagination, with palms pressed together, holding a stick of incense. The master and disciples invite them by chanting together. He adds, if you wish, you may expand on this by offering the ritual bath and the mandala. This is the brief liturgy. This is taken from the Shantadeva's Guide to the Bodhisattva Way of Life. It's not part of our Western culture. But as we visualize, a little bit of commentary, very small, as we visualize these enlightened beings, these objects of refuge, of course we're visualizing them with our own minds. We don't have anything else to visualize them with. Our own minds have our own impurities, preconceptions, blockages, negativities, and so on. So as we visualize the Buddhas, we imagine bathing the Buddhas that we brought to mind, not as if they need a bath. It's silly. We're bathing them in our mind's eye, cleansing them of the impurities that we superimpose upon them. A deeply symbolic act. So in this liturgy, it reads, just as the gods bathed you as soon as you were born, referring to Buddha Shakyamuni, so do I bathe you with pure divine water. This is a glorious supreme bath with the unsurpassable water of compassion, with the water of blessings and primordial consciousness. Grant me whatever cities I desire. The body, speech, and mind of the Jinas, the conquerors, the victorious ones, are free of the obscurations of mental afflictions. But in order to purify the obscurations of the body, speech, and mind of sentient beings, I bathe you with pure water. So this is explicitly a cultivation of pure vision. That as we purify our own awareness, our own minds, we're moving in the direction of actually having a pure vision of the Buddhas themselves, as has been realized by so many of the great beings of the past. Direct visions of Tara, of Padmasambhava, of Nagarjuna, and so on. This is how we purify the mind. And in the same liturgy, Shantideva continues, the foundation of the earth, anointed with perfumed water and strewn with flowers, adorned with Mount Meru, the 4 world sectors, the sun and moon, I visualize as a pure realm of the Buddhas. So we imagine purifying here not only our vision of Amitabha, Avalokiteshvara, Buddha Shakyamuni, Vajrapani, and so on, but we imagine purifying our entire environment, seeing with the power of our imagination our own environment as a pure realm, a pure manifestation of Buddha mind. Due to this offering, may all beings experience this perfectly pure realm. And offering this mandala, we conclude with the mantra, Idam Ratna Mandalakam Niryatayami. Thus imagine that the objects of refuge are experientially present in the space in front of you. Indeed, they are actually present. For it is said, for those who believe in the Buddha, the sage is present before them. And another quote, like reflections of the moon in water, they appear wherever you look. So they are actually present. So imagine that. I would suggest these teachings are speaking to your own intuitive wisdom. This is not a logical analysis or looking for empirical evidence. But intuitively, these teachings invite you to imagine right here and now you are in the presence of all the objects of refuge, who, as you are aware of them, they are compassionately aware of you. In the practice of Vajrayana, we use visualization so much to imagine our own body, speech, and mind, our environment, the Lama, and so on, our spiritual friends. We imagine seeing them with pure vision, as enlightened ones within an enlightened field of Pure Land. But it's said in these teachings that while we're imagining this to be the case, in fact, it's already true. We're imagining something that is already real here and now, but which we cannot ordinarily see because the veils the veils of afflictions, the veils of obscurations that prevent us from directly seeing this deeper reality, this sacred space inhabited by sacred beings. Moreover, the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas dwelling in the pure realms of the 10 directions see you with their eyes of primordial consciousness, and they certainly hear you chanting. So this is the same as requesting the vows from all the Buddhas. So it's not simply as if you're requesting the vows of refuge from all the Buddhas. You visualize that you're actually doing so. And you are actually doing so. With the representations of the enlightened body, speech, and mind, the Buddha image, the Dharma, the stupa, with the representations of the body, enlightened body, speech, and mind that you've set out in front of you, as the basis of your visualization, request me to be your guru, your lama. So writes Karma Chagmé. Imagine requesting the vows of Mahayana Refuge. The objects of refuge are of the nature of the 3 embodiments. And the blessed Buddhas are the jewel of the Buddha. Request them to be your fundamental refuge. The holy jewel of the Dharma is of the nature of the Mahayana scriptures and insights. Request this as your refuge in terms of the path. The Bodhisattvas abiding on the first ground, the first Arya Bodhisattva Bhumi, those Arya Bodhisattvas. The Bodhisattvas abiding on the first ground and beyond, to the higher Arya, the Bodhisattva Bhumis, are the Mahayana jewel of the Sangha. So here is taking refuge, the Mahayana refuge. Imagine requesting them to be your refuge by being your companions along the path. This does not entail going for refuge for our own sake alone. Seek refuge in order to bring all sentient beings to the state of spiritual awakening, Buddhahood itself. If we ask why take refuge? There's the final answer. In order to bring all sentient beings to their own perfection. This is not seeking refuge only for the duration of your life, as in the case of the Hinayana. Rather think, I seek refuge from today until I achieve enlightenment. So simply imagine the next section. On bended knee, with your palms pressed together, and with a single pointed wish to request the Mahayana vows of refuge, recite this after me 3 times. So let's do so. Of course, if you wish to adopt that posture, of course you can. So here is the actual taking of the vows, the Mahayana vows of refuge, and we'll recite it 3 times. All Buddhas and Bodhisattvas of the 10 directions, please attend to me. Please recite after me.
All Buddhas and Bodhisattvas of the 10 directions, please attend to me.
Mentor, please attend to me.
Please attend to me.
From this time, until I am present in the essence of enlightenment. I take refuge in the Blessed Buddha, the foremost among human beings. I take refuge in the Holy Dharma, the foremost freedom from attachment. I take refuge in the Aryas and non-returning Sangha, the foremost community. We recite for a second time. All Buddhas and Bodhisattvas of the 10 directions, please attend to me. Mentor, please attend to me. From this time until I am present in the essence of enlightenment. I take refuge in the Blessed Buddha, the foremost among human beings. I take refuge in the Holy Dharma, the foremost freedom from attachment. I take refuge in the Aryas and non-returning Sangha, the foremost community. We'll recite for a third time, and on the conclusion of that, I'll snap my fingers. At that time, imagine you received the Mahayana vows of refuge. So for a third time, all Buddhas and Bodhisattvas of the 10 directions, please attend to me. Mentor, please attend to me. From this time until I am present in the essence of enlightenment. I take refuge in the Blessed Buddha, the foremost among human beings. I take refuge in the Holy Dharma, the foremost freedom from attachment. I take refuge in the Aryas and non-returning Sangha, the foremost community. Karma Chagmé continues. Oh, now consider that the Mahayana vows of refuge have arisen in your mind streams. And respond, well done. To which the mentor replies, this is the method. Which is to say, this is how it's done. That's how it's done. Well done, we could also say bravo. These are the benefits of receiving the Mahayana vows of refuge. You're protected from all harm and injury in this life except that which comes from the fruition of previous actions, from bad omens, and from falling to the Hinayana. Let's stop there. It needs to be interpreted in a sensible way. He's not talking about some sectarian thing following to some other religion. It's Mahayana Hinayana. The Hinayana literally means it's not a school. It's not Theravada. It's not some other school. It's falling back into aspiration. I just want out myself. I just want out myself. Some sectarian thing following to some other religion. It's Mahayana Hinayana. The Hinayana literally means it's not a school. It's not Theravada. It's not some other school. It's falling back into aspiration. I just want out myself. I just want out myself. Whatever your monastery is, whatever your color of your robes are, whoever your lineage is, and so forth, it's falling back and just seeing, I really get this. I really get this. Just seeing the enormities and so forth. It's falling back and just seeing, I really get this. I really get this. Just seeing the enormity of how the world is screwed up. And how so many people have no interest whatsoever in Dharma. They seem to be absolutely devoted to behaving contrary to Dharma. They have and if you try to persuade them otherwise, they'll cut off your head. And it seems like we're violating the planet in every way that human beings can possibly imagine. And one could imagine, one could see, I get this. You might feel, this world has no use for me. This world has no use for Mahayana. It doesn't want anything from me. Nothing. So then why should I give them what they don't even want? And the path to my liberation is so much shorter, so much simpler. It's meeting silence to silence, which is so much simpler than silence in the midst of this incredible global mess. That's slipping back to Hinayana. Nothing to do with sectarianism. There are people who are outwardly following the Mahayana path, and they're completely dedicated to Hinayana. There are people who are outwardly Theravada, or they could be Christian, they could be, have no classification, who are absolutely embodiments of the Bodhisattva way of life. It's not a matter of sect. So easily, with our background, with all this sectarian warfare we've had in the West, and of course there's in plenty of the East, it's easy to read that, but that's not what's meant. Never has been meant that. And in the future, you'll be protected from the fears of miserable destinations, the lower realms, or miserable realms of rebirth, and the fears of the cyclic existence, samsara. The ornament for the sutras, one of the 5 works of Maitreya, Dodegen, it's called Tibetan, states, because it protects from all injuries, from miserable destinations, misdeeds, fears, and the Hinayana, it is the sublime refuge. Let's read a bit further. Upon receiving the vows of refuge, you must engage in the corresponding disciplines. So this calls for refuge from the side of the object of refuge, but then it correspondingly calls for some commitment from ourselves. It's not passive. So with respect to those disciplines, there are 3 general practices, 3 specific practices, and 3 affiliated practices, making 9 altogether. So let's read them. It's worth knowing. Because otherwise, again, we can just slip back into liturgy, and then it's just noise. So among these 3 general practices, the first of these is always endeavor to make offerings to the jewels, at least offering the first morsel of your meals. I mean, the idea, of course, that you're simply offering your whole life, and everything good in your life, all your possessions, your virtues, and so forth. You're just offering these all up. Do not abandon the jewels at the cost of your life or for any reward, and frequently practice going for refuge by recollecting the excellent qualities of the jewels, the Buddha, Dhamma, and Sangha. So it's an ongoing commitment. I often think of this, this is so similar in some respects, obviously not all, to a wedding ceremony, where there's a formality there, there's a ritual, there's the environment, there's a recitation and so forth. And then there's being married, and having a very fruitful and meaningful commitment of 2 people to each other. Well, it's obviously not the same, but the parallels are not insignificant. That the carry-through is where all the juice is. The ceremony, the ritual, opens a door for that. It's a verbal, public commitment, public in your own mind in any way, to this relationship, this commitment to this path, the Buddha, Dhamma, and Sangha. The second of these 3, the 3 specific practices, so that was it, that was 3 right there. So there's 3 general practices, that was short. So just generally offering, you eat meal, just offering, the sense of just offering. Here's a beautiful place for it. I was taught this years ago. When you look around, see if you can find some really beautiful view someplace. And you look out, it's just the beauties of nature, the countryside. And where, in many cases, like this little village of Pamaya, from my view, it's just like it's an ornament to an already beautiful landscape. Isn't it true? And that's where human beings are blessing the environment rather than invading it, And so where we see the natural landscape, the land, the sky, we can see the Mediterranean over there on the horizon, and then these beautiful villages, beautiful villas that are like ornaments, like jewels. And she, gosh, it's so lovely. And instead of just letting that be an object of attachment, I wonder if I could rent a place here. I wonder if I could own some of it. I should go into development. This place got a lot of potential. I could definitely make some good money out of this, Instead of just looking at it with ordinary, mundane vision of attachment, and then hoping other people don't move here because then it gets cluttered with Americans, and who wants that, Rather than mundane, to just think, just see the beauties of the beauties of it all, and it's just too good to keep. Just offer it all up. Just offer it all to the Buddhas. Then it's sweet. And then your very enjoyment turns into Dharma. So you don't have to stop enjoying and get back to the serious stuff of practicing Dharma. The enjoyment of the beauties the enjoyment of your meal, is an expression of your giving. As you're eating it, you're giving it to all the little critters inside your body. You're making it an offering. So this, when Dom Dumba said, give up all attachment to this life and let your mind become Dharma, this is telling me how you actually do that. When you're eating, you're going for a walk, you're seeing a beautiful villa, and so on. And then we have the specific practices. The 3 specific practices include, once you have gone for refuge in the Buddha, do not go for refuge in other gods. So this is, again, it's really anything that is outside this sphere. Now, the Dalai Lama himself has said Jesus was a Buddha. I don't know whether he was or not, but clearly suggesting this is not a sectarian issue of like all the other religions are somehow inferior, but this is the right one, and so don't stray from the right one. Well, we're familiar with that theme, but that's not what's intended here. But rather taking refuge in other gods like George Clooney. I don't know. Angelina Jolie is a good candidate, you know. Or, you know, just all this stuff, all the allures of samsara. Years ago, 28 years ago, gosh, it seems so long ago, but you know, when we had that 1-year retreat, we had the 1-year Shamatha retreat, and Genlam Rinpa, this marvelous yogi, was the teacher. I was like his apprentice in that retreat. He told people at the beginning of the retreat, now they're going for 1 year, just total immersion to Shamatha. And this, Genlam Rinpa had hardly had any contact with Westerners back then. It was me and, I'm not quite sure, you know, there weren't many people. So he was really from Tibet, just slipped over the mountains, went into retreat. So he didn't really have much contact with what we call the modern world. And so he is just speaking to these Westerners as pretty much as if they're Tibetans. And I was interpreting for him. His nephew was also there, so he was doing a lot of the interpreting for the interviews. But he said, you know, over the course of this year, it's very possible that you will have visions of demons, malevolent spirits, and so forth. And if that happens, then do this. And he tells you how to, you know, deal with that. Well, it may come as no surprise to you. 12 people for 1 year, not one demon. Not even one good juicy demon. Not even one, you know, like something. But did the demons of arrogance come up? Oh yeah, big time. Big hairy demons. Me, I'm superior, I'm special, I'm holy. The demons of fear come up, big time. In some cases, sure. Fear with no referent. Fear with no referent. Kind of the best kind of fear. Because it's empty. It really is empty. It has no object at all. It's just a great big bubble of fear. You know, but it certainly feels real. You know. And so for us, you know, brought up in modernity, demons are really not part of the landscape. They were in the 15th, 16th, 17th century. They're everywhere, and people were quite terrified of being possessed by them. Myriad of demons, right? The whole witch hunting craze that just preceded the rise of modernity, the rise of the scientific revolution and so forth, and for which the scientific revolution served as a major medication to heal us of the psychosis of that. In that world, you know, these demons were very much part of the landscape, you know, but not now. But that doesn't mean that we're not beset by the same problems. They just don't take on that appearance, right? And so then likewise for gods. I mean, really, if we ask, you know, are you really tempted? Which god did you want to, you know, scurry off to? Probably there aren't any. I mean, are you thinking Indra or, you know, probably not. It's probably not even an issue. It's kind of like an irrelevant statement. Unless we take refuge, we commit ourselves to the path, and then 5 years later we're not. 5 years later we're not, because we're pursuing something else. You can call that a god if you like. Because that has now caught the attention, captured our allegiance. That is where we're offering all of our offerings. That's where our commitment, that's what we're taking refuge in. It could be a new marriage, it could be a new job. It could be an aspiration for, you know, a successful business. It could be all kinds of stuff. Those are our gods. Not somebody with arms and ornaments and all that kind of business. And that does happen. It happens not infrequently. I love one of the short stories. It's not even a short story. It was from a Christian minister. Very good man, very good heart. And he spoke, and he was giving a sermon, obviously within the context of his own faith. And he said, you know, I've got a metaphor for you. You got a flock of sheep. Let's say 1,000 sheep, a big flock of sheep. And then on occasion, a sheep goes astray, right? The shepherd brings them all back to the fold, and then, oops, one's missing, right? And then, you know, It's been around for a long time. Then the shepherd has to go off looking for the lost sheep, right? It's a big common metaphor parable in the Christian tradition. But the pastor raised the question, look, you got 1,000 sheep. They smell. They really do. They smell. You got 1,000 sheep. They smell like sheep. And they're going, blah, blah. There's 1,000 of them going, blah, blah. You know, they too have, you know, the wandering minds. And so you got this blah going and the smelling, and then you get lost. How does a sheep ever get lost? Get separated from and not know where are the 1,000 sheep I used to be with? How is it conceivable that sheep ever get lost? You know. And then he answered the question. You ready? Blade by blade. Blade of grass by blade of grass. You go into samadhi on the blade of grass right in front of you. And then there's just one over there, and the 1,000 are right behind you. And then one more. Oh yeah, but just that one. Oh, that one looks good. Oh, that one's really tasty. I see one over there. And you just blade by blade. And then you look around and say, where is everybody? You know? And that's how we lose the Dharma. You know, people get really, I've seen this. You know, I'm an old geezer by now. I've watched a lot of people practice Dharma. I've seen myself practice Dharma and sometimes lose the thread. But how does it happen? It doesn't happen usually by one day thinking, I've had it with Dharma, I'm now going to become something else, I'm going to do something else. Not usually. It happens blade by blade. That something catches our fancy. Another ideal, there's a God, another ideal comes to mind. And we start pursuing that. And then we get immersed. And then we have a bright idea, and another bright idea, and then more immersion. And then after a while, our dedication to Dharma is entirely lip service. And we may say, oh, my life is Dharma. And everybody's laughing. So those are the gods. Those are the gods. And for us, I think those are the gods. Don't go for refuge. People do. I mean, in modernity, I've seen this all the time. Stephen Hawking, this brilliant man. And I very much enjoyed the movie on his life. It was very, very moving. Entirely secular man, which is totally understandable. But he made a comment some years ago. With all of his enormous, must be the most famous scientist on the planet, right? Such an icon. And one might imagine with that kind of, and his accomplishments awesome, and his brilliance awesome, his colleagues awesome, one might think that he would just take enormous satisfaction, that he'd just wake up every morning thinking, I'm Stephen Hawking. Whoo! You know? But he said, the one thing that really brings meaning to my life, really brings me happiness, is my family. My family, that's what he said. No, I think he could probably just retire, lose his reputation, whatever, but if he still had his family, I think he'd be quite happy. That was what he indicated, I think, yeah? So what's his refuge? Is it God, Jesus, Buddha, Dharma? What's his refuge? Refuge is his family. And you see, I'm not speaking denigratingly or anything like that, but I mean, that's just the literal truth. That's his refuge. That's what he goes to for protection, for happiness, for the meaning of his life. And when I read that, maybe I'm exaggerating a little bit, but I felt kind of like this tremor in my heart for him. And thinking, have you ever heard of a family where they're all in the car at the same time and they have a head-on collision with a drunk driver? And then suddenly, your refuge just disappeared from the face of the planet. And I thought, oh, I would be afraid if my refuge were my family. I love my family. I think you all love your families. But if that's your ultimate refuge, be afraid. They will vanish. Whether it's an automobile accident, or old age, or cancer, or just moving away, just one thing we know. I mean, wherever there's meeting, there's parting. And so if you're taking refuge in something where there's a coming together, then know there's going to be a parting. This is why refuge has to go beyond the appearances. Individual teachers, His Holiness, any teacher. It's got to be deeper than that. Because when all is said and done, teachers come and go. Right? Most of my teachers are gone. Most of my teachers were raised in Tibet, trained in Tibet. I'm now a geezer. And they're no longer geezers. You know, most of them are gone. So I can't meet them anymore. But does this mean my practice is impoverished? I'm not setting myself up as something special, but is my practice depleted and malnourished because so many of my lamas have passed away? The answer is no. That's not how they taught me. They taught me well, right? When I was a youngster, I memorized a couple of 100 pages of Dharma. We all did. Everybody did. I was in the monastery. Can't remember those anymore. They're gone. That's normal. You know, in the Geshe training, you memorize Abhisamalankara, Majjhimakavattara. We memorize all of the Lodic Buddha psychology. We memorize the whole Dura text. We memorize the whole Tadik text on logic. We memorized it all. Everybody did. There's nothing special. I can't remember any of that anymore. It's okay. The meaning is kind of there. So the refuge has to go beyond the appearances. Beyond the appearances of the temples, the monasteries, the books, the people. It has to go deeper than that. And not taking refuge in anything that is an idol. How about that one? An idol. The Sutra of the Great Liberation states, one who has gone for refuge in the Buddhas is a genuine upasaka. This is a person who holds the lay precepts, and never does one seek refuge in other gods. Since you have gone for refuge in the Dharma, do not. So that was relevant to refuge in the Buddha, and then now relevant to refuge in the Dharma. This is really crucial. This one has no defense mechanisms coming in. Since you've gone for refuge in the Dharma, and I will add this, the Buddha Dharma is rooted in compassion. Were the Buddha not motivated by compassion, there would be no Buddha Dharma. That's just a factual statement. But since you've gone for refuge in the Dharma, do not inflict injury upon sentient beings. As Sutra states, once you've gone for refuge in the Holy Dharma, be free of thoughts of inflicting harm and injury. And then we have the Sangha. Since you have gone for refuge in the Sangha, do not devote yourself to extremists. People hold views who follow behavior, conduct that is contrary to, incompatible with, the teachings of the Buddha, the way of life taught by the Buddha. A sutra states, once you have gone for refuge in the Sangha, do not veer towards extremists. Let's read a little bit more, we're almost finished. The three affiliated practices include reverence toward images of the Tathagata, which represents the jewel of the Buddha, and even a satsa, or satya fragment, the little clay tablets, the clay images. Just a fragment, just a chip of such an image, show reverence there. It's symbolic, but show reverence. Reverence towards volumes of Dharma, treat each one with reverence, which represent the jewel of the Dharma. So these are all symbolic, but symbols are powerful. Symbols for evil are very powerful. The swastika is a very powerful image now, ever since the rise of this. And you just see that, and bam, the connotation, and it's just a diagram. And it's a Buddhist diagram, for heaven's sakes. So the Buddhists, it was just immutability, the immutability of Dharma, and great. And then the Nazis took it over, and now when anybody sees it, except for the person who's very damaged mind, it's just a symbol. Oh, but boy, what a symbol, right? That's just one of many. The cross, the star, the crescent, so many symbols. The American flag, People, boy, symbols are powerful. Burn it, watch what happens. And so, symbols are always important. So, symbols are important. They're part of our lives. They're everywhere. They should be taken seriously. And this is taken seriously in a very, beneficial way. So, reverence toward volumes of Dharma would represent the jewel of the Dharma, and even a single syllable of such texts, and reverence to the garments of the revealer, that is the Buddha, which represent the jewel of the Sangha, and even a yellow patch of such cloth. These are symbolic of the clothes of the ordained Sangha. Even that, it's symbolic, show reverence. It means something, it's beneficial. These are the 8 benefits of going for refuge. You enter into the community of the Buddhists, the Buddha Dharma. This becomes the basis for all vows. You do want to take lay precepts, monastic precepts, bodhisattva, vajrayana. All your previous misdeeds, call it sin, call it misdeeds, harmful karma, are extinguished. This all needs some commentary, but we'll just go through it for the time being. You are not afflicted by human or non-human obstructive forces. You accomplish everything you intend. Don't put a time limit on that one. And your mind stream becomes endowed with great merit. You do not descend to miserable states of existence, and you swiftly, manifestly achieve perfect enlightenment. This is receiving the Mahayana vows of refuge. So there it is. It's 6 o'clock, but just a tiny commentary here. This was classic teachings, of course, classic, and it's true for all schools of Mahayana Buddhism. It's not Kagyü or anything like that. But taking refuge, I mean, it's a very Buddhist phrase, but it refers to something that everybody does. Everybody entrusts themselves to something or someone. I think maybe there are a few here, but their lives are so impoverished that they're only objects of compassion. And these are people I don't trust anybody. I don't rely on anybody. The world sucks. People are awful. I'm just going to stand by myself. That's really a tough road to hoe. That's difficult. That's not a bountiful life. Everybody who's living a bountiful life in any way, they're taking refuge. When I was in Florence last summer, I had this persistent toothache. I took refuge in the dentist. In Florence, he did a really good job. Got root canal. Started in Florence, ended in Santa Barbara. But I took refuge. I don't know how to give myself a root canal. And it sounds really awful to try to do it to yourself. That would be really awkward. Even if I were a dentist, I had to take refuge in somebody who knows teeth better than I do. And so we take refuge all the time. Spouses take refuge in each other. They entrust themselves to each other with confidence, with trust. And then people who have money, want to invest it, they may entrust themselves to a financial counselor and that kind of thing, and so on. It's everywhere. You entrust your children to the school and the teachers that are having a strong influence on them 6-7 hours a day. That's trust, that's refuge. These are the jewels of your heart, your own children. You're entrusting them to other people. Homeschooling them all the way to college, it's difficult. And so when it comes to our hedonic well-being, there are a lot of really good refuges out there. Good dentists, good doctors, good teachers, and so forth and so on. But then within the context of this life, we have a hedonic well-being that we all know is very, very important, and for which there's a lot of help utterly outside of the scope of Buddha Dhamma. Totally good help. My dentist, I doubt very much that he was human, but it was the only time I've ever been to a dentist. I'm telling you the truth here. He was just taking care of it temporarily, because we knew we were doing the major work back in California. It really was the most pleasant encounter I've ever had with a dentist in my life. And I tell you why. He come in here, he was so sweet. I mean, he created an opening, because this is like, I need it right now. The next day I had an appointment, right there in Florence, and invited me in. It was a spick and span, great clinic. He invited me in, he had his 2 lovely assistants. I enjoyed them too. But are you ready for the punchline? As he's working on my teeth, he sang. I'm not kidding. And he had a good voice. He sang. It's like he's saying, I am Italian, and you are the recipient, except I don't know what he was singing, but it really sounded cool. And I thought, whoa, this is the guy I can take refuge in. Anybody who loves his work so much that he sings while he's working on other people's molars, he's got to be good. So for hedonia, we have wonderful Italian dentists, and so on. But when it comes to eudaimonia, for really, who do we take refuge in? Who do we trust? It's a simple thing. It's not a catechism. It's not, did you get all your beliefs right? How many hells are there? 17 or 18? It's not that. It's not to say that's insignificant, but it's not a catechism. That's not what determines Buddhist from non-Buddhist. It's trust. It really is. It's a nice, ordinary term. It's trust. And if you trust the Buddha, his enlightenment, his life, his words, his impact on the world, if you trust what we have of his Dharma that's been passed down over 100 generations, if you trust that these are, in fact, the teachings of the Buddha, if you trust those who most sublimely embody the qualities of the Buddha Dhamma, then you're a Buddhist. That's it. And if you don't, it doesn't matter what you call yourself or how many beliefs you have. You're not a Buddhist. It's a matter of trust. Right? And within this context of this lifetime, which we have no idea how short it's going to be, so one friend of mine said, he's about my age, he said, I'm now too old to die young. If I died now, nobody would say, oh, he died so young. Nobody's going to think that. That ship has sailed. Right? But for hedonia, refuges are many, but within the context of this life, that which we can see, that which is evident, for those of us who are aware of, and I think we all are, otherwise we wouldn't be in this room, eudaimonia, genuine happiness, genuine well-being, the meaning of life, according to His Holiness Dalai Lama and so many of the great sages, East and West, religious and non-religious. Socrates, Plato, Aristotle, Taoist, Hindus, Buddhists, Christians, Sufis, and so forth and so on. It's really perennial wisdom that the cultivation, the unveiling of eudaimonia, of genuine well-being. The Buddha said, find what truly makes you happy and follow it. Yeah. And so, but then how do we cultivate, how do we succeed, how do we realize an ever-ripening, flowering sense of genuine well-being? Who's the expert? Who really knows about that? Within the context of this lifetime, you might look to the Buddha. He was free. You might look to the Dharma. That's what it's all about. The Dharma is a way of viewing reality, engaging with reality, that brings forth an enduring sense of well-being, which cannot be anything other than eudaimonia. Or in Buddhism it's called sat sukha, sublime well-being, or samyak sukha, authentic well-being. All of Buddha Dharma is about that. Arising from ethics, arising from samadhi, the cultivation of the mind, arising from wisdom. So if that's your passion, then it's hard to do that on one's own because our minds really are strongly influenced by mental afflictions. But that's within the context of this life. That's a really good reason to take refuge here. And then when we consider one of the not unprecedented insights, but enormously important direct discoveries by the Buddha, and that is the continuity of individual consciousness after death. That just is a game changer. Everything changes. I mean, just almost unimaginably changes. If we incorporate that into our vision of who we are and what's the nature of reality, it just couldn't be more different. One is playing for peanuts. It's like playing with poker and playing with peanut shells. Really. Because you can die at any minute, so you win, you lose. You succeed, you don't. When you're dead, you're terminated, so it's kind of end of game, it's over. So that was a really small game. The stakes were so low, you can hardly even see them. You're out, you're obliterated. You become a non-entity. Boy, is that game over. So if that's all we're dealing with here, then the stakes are low. The stakes are really low. And then you open up to the indestructibility of the flow of consciousness. That is like matter energy, it's like space-time. It can transform in all kinds of ways, but you cannot make it become nothing. And when you get that one, when the spear of that truth penetrates your heart, it just changes everything. And then you think, oh my goodness. I have some idea how to live a sensible life. I have a sense of conscience, a sense of right and wrong in this lifetime. But if I can never depart from reality, if that's never, ever, for eternity, an option to just say, reality, no thanks, I'm out of here, and become a non-entity, if that's not even an option, then caramba. The stakes have now gone infinite, from peanut shells to Mount Meru. I mean, it couldn't be larger. And now who can give me some guidance on this one? That I'd like every life to be meaningful, every life to move in a direction of goodness, of virtue, of happiness, of wisdom. That's what I want. I don't want to be in this. It's already hell realm. Wandering around with no Dharma, that's already hell realm as far as I'm concerned. No Dharma, no teachers, no nothing, just where's the money, where's the fame, where's the power? I've just already arrived in hell as far as I'm concerned. That is a life not worth living, let alone life after life after life. That just scares the crap out of me, to think that that might ever happen. And yet it has happened. That's where it goes Mahayana vows of refuge. It has happened to many people. It's their reality right now. They have no idea, in any language, what Dharma is, what a path is, how to cultivate them. No idea. Then it's Mahayana vows of refuge. Really, there's only one thing to be done. In that. I mean, it's simple. There's only one thing to be done. That's become a Buddha as quickly as possible, to be of greatest possible service, to bring people out of the darkness of their own delusion, their own ignorance. And then who can lead us to perfect enlightenment? Well, that's kind of an obvious one. A Buddha. Yeah. And what do we practice to get there? The Dharma. And who will help us along the way? Sangha. welcome to the Mahayana vows of refuge. Enjoy the evening. See you tomorrow morning.